Welcome to Planting Pinellas, the podcast that digs deep into the heart of gardening in Pinellas County. Presented by Master Gardener volunteers of the University of Florida Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences. I'm Charlotte Vaughn.
I'm Alan Shapiro. Whether you're a local looking to connect with your community or a visitor curious about your area's culture, conservation, and all things green, this is the place for you.
Join us as we explore the people, places, projects, and of course plants that make Pinellas a thriving hub of sustainability, innovation, and natural beauty. From gardening tips to environmental initiatives, we've got the roots of Pinellas covered. So grab your gardening gloves and let's get started.
Hi, welcome back to Planting Pinellas. This episode is going to be on Principle 5, which is attracting wildlife.
I want to revisit the ones that we've already covered. We did this last month as well. But Principle 1 is the right plant in the right place, and everything links back to that so heavily. And I won't say that one is more important than another, but I think it's number 1 for a reason. Number 2 is watering efficiently. 3 is fertilizing appropriately. 4 is mulch. This one, number 5, is attracting wildlife. But then, interestingly enough, number 6 next month is going to be about managing yard pests in a responsible way. So you can have too much of a good thing, but we'll get to that next month.
Yeah.
Number 7 is recycling. Number 8 is managing stormwater runoff. And number 9 is protecting the waterfront. So those are the Florida-friendly landscaping 9 principles published by the University of Florida Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences. IFAS, that's a mouthful, but that's who we are. So for our attracting wildlife, that can mean a lot of things. That can mean big things, that can mean small things. And Florida itself is renowned for being a diverse and really unique kind of an ecosystem. But the rapid development that we have, particularly in our area and just along the coast in general, that's continuing to destroy wildlife habitat. So as we're developing new properties, we're looking for land, and we're a landlocked county. So where are you getting that land from? You're taking it away from natural spaces at some point, or places that maybe have not been in use for a while and they've sort of become a little bit wild, and now you're redeveloping them again. It's taking away potential habitat, and that can impact birds, it can impact other animals, it can impact insects. And that is part of what I'm focusing in on today in a lot of ways, because the insects are something that even if you don't have a big space, you can provide space for them. And you say, well, Alan, I don't want bugs in my garden. Yeah, you do. Yeah,
you do. And we're certainly going to talk more about the bugs in the next episode, but very few bugs are really that bad.
Yeah, really 1% are considered harmful.
Most bugs are going to be beneficial for a lot of things.
Or at least neutral.
Or at least neutral. They're not going to harm anything. And I think that's one of the misconceptions. So by attracting wildlife, pollinators are one of those types of wildlife. Bees, for example, can actually enhance your yard, enhance the environment. I think one of the things that you mentioned, which I thought was interesting, again, is with our landscape, people building a home or doing the landscape. That's what I think, if we go back to the principles that you talked about, just doing a few things and using these principles can really be beneficial.
Yeah, even the small lots that many of us have, the way that we use them is impactful. And if we make them all rock or pavement, we make them all mulch or grass, all of those things, some may be more or less helpful than others, but if you can reduce the amount of space that is just blank in a way, that it's not helping anybody, maybe it looks pretty in some context, but is it benefiting the ecosystem around you? And so reducing your turf, reducing your paved areas, using even just permeable pavement can be a benefit. But we're focusing today on what we can do for wildlife. And I guess it's kind of easy to think about pollinators because they're pretty, and we recognize that
we like the butterflies, we like bees, but there's a lot of other wildlife that we have.
Yeah, and recognizing that the pollinators are responsible for many of our favorite foods. That if we're eating something that came from a plant, a pollinator has been involved.
That goes back to awareness.
Right,
You know,
yeah.
and I think that's one of the things that we, with this podcast, are trying to convey on people is a little bit more of awareness. And I don't think a lot of people really think about that, you know, that the bees, without the bees, we may not have all this wonderful food.
Yeah. Avocados, mangoes, strawberries, all these different foods that are pollinated by insects. And there are some plants like corn that are wind pollinated, and that's fine. But I don't want to eat corn all day, every day. I want to have some variety. And there are certain things like, I want to say it's a kind of a dragon fruit that it's a night blooming flower. And it's pollinated specifically by certain kinds of moths. And so if we lose that moth, we could potentially lose dragon fruit. It could go extinct if its pollinator is lost. So there is an awareness aspect to this that I want to point out an event that's coming up in the month of August, and it will be for 2025. It'll be on the 22nd and 23rd of August, and this is the Great Southeast Pollinator Census, and more locally, the Great Florida Pollinator Census. And this is a community science project. You can participate from anywhere in the Southeast. Honestly, you don't even have to be in Florida. There are organizations that are working with this in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, and South Carolina. And the Great Southeast Pollinator Census has a website, which is gsepc.org. It's the initials of Great Southeast Pollinator
And I think
Census.
you're going to put that in the show notes.
I will put it in the show notes.
That's a great idea.
I don't know if everybody reads those, so I figured I'd at least throw that one out here.
I know. That's a good one. Say it again.
So Great Southeast Pollinator Census, gsepc.org. And you can actually print out a lot of resources on that website, from the count sheets that they have images to help you understand what kind of pollinators you're looking at. There are certificates that you can print out. Maybe if you have a classroom that you get your students engaged with this, that you can give everybody a certificate that they participated in the census for this year. And stickers that you can print, either if you have some adhesive paper or you just want to put some tape on the back or glue it onto something. There's just a lot of cool resources.
And from my understanding, it's 15 minutes.
15 minutes of observation. And you can do multiple observation sheets, but they want each sheet to represent 15 minutes of time on a single plant. So you pick your spot, and it's a good idea to go ahead and sort of be watching around your yard, or maybe you could go out on your lunch break at the office and there might be some flower bushes around in the parking lot. And wherever you are, you can probably find a spot that has some kind of plants. And if it has flowers, it's probably going to attract more pollinators. But anywhere, even some of the grasses and things that we have, or ground covers. I was out in my garden this morning and I saw some of the white peacock butterflies on my frog fruit grass. And that's one of the reasons that I planted it, is because it's their host plant. And so this one was just perched on there for a couple of minutes, hanging out.
It's a very enjoyable activity. And then you're also contributing to a greater understanding and a greater science.
Yeah, the problem is that pollinators are in a serious risk of decline. And if you look at even just the last 5 or 10 years, that there has been an average rate of decline of about 4% per year. So if you consider that going forward, if we lose 4% this year and 4% next year and 4% the year after that, how many years is it until we don't have butterflies anymore, or whatever pollinator you want to pick out? That this matters, and we can do something about it now in ways that will save us a lot of trouble later.
I think it's going to be beneficial for so many people. And I guess when they're all done, you would go back to the site, and then there's a place to input your data.
Yes. So if you are working with a group, then you can give that to your group leader, and one person can submit all of it. Or if you're working on your own, you can go to that same Great Southeast Pollinator Census.org website. There is a button on there that you can click to load your data. It'll be open during the later part of August and possibly into the beginning of September for this year. And then after that, then you can do it for fun, but to actually submit a report, you'd be waiting for 2026. Once that report goes into the website, then the scientific community is able to use that to track pollinator information and be able to support those populations and to watch for if there's significant decline in certain areas versus others, that then they might be able to get into why and see how we can help.
Yeah. So with all of that and what we're going to be talking about today in terms of attracting wildlife in our own yards, there are 10 tips from IFAS that you can do. And we're going to go through each tip and talk a little bit about what that tip is and a little bit of information on that. One of the things I would like to start is, and we talked about this in the last episode, and I think it's important, and it keeps coming back into my mind constantly, and that's a tolerance. In terms of, do you have to do all 10 of these tips? Of course not. But what you feel is good, you should do. And then again, there's going to be some tolerance in terms of your own household with your significant other.
Sure, or with your community. If you have certain rules and regulations that you have to abide by for the aesthetics of your property, that maybe you can't have a beehive in your front yard, but you can have more flower bushes.
That's what I was going to get at, right. So with a lot of HOAs, I'm going to assume that there probably is going to be some leeway to be able to do something. And I think that's important. So if you can just do something, that would be great.
And I think it's amazing how I've been seeing little bits along the way that HOAs are increasing their tolerance to. Maybe not all of them, but that they're looking for ways that they can kind of create a positive impact environmentally within their community, that maybe there's a vacant lot that they can really focus on making it a wildlife habitat. And I love it when I get to see that around our area, because we're landlocked, we're urban, we have so much development, and every time that we're developing a property, we're potentially reducing a habitat. And us as individuals, as property owners, as renters, as seasonal residents, whatever we are, we can do small things to make an impact. And the more of us that are doing the small things, the bigger the impact. And then there's some people that can do bigger things. And so it's all helpful. It's just wherever you can, do whatever you can.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think
so what are we going to do?
I think that's important. So the first tip is to limit the amount of lawn.
And these are in no particular order, but I will say that this one kind of stands out a lot to me, because a lawn to most pollinators is not any better than concrete. It really gives them no benefit.
It really has no benefit. It's kind of a monoculture. It's mowed. So if anything is going to grow up that could potentially help a pollinator or any kind of wildlife, it's going to be chopped off. It's going to be gone.
And turf grass is often associated with chemical applications that limit certain kinds of plants or insects. And so the less that you need that, the better for the pollinators. Now, I keep coming back to pollinators. And again, it is something that we can connect with and appreciate. But the fact is, the pollinators are also a food source. It's a food web where in my yard, I have a butterfly garden where I've planted things that are host plants and nectar sources, and I don't use pesticides in that garden. And I had a very happy, thriving little bird's nest in that section of my garden this spring, because they had food sources. And so
Right.
I'm attracting those caterpillars, those butterflies, and some of them are going to get eaten. And there
But
are
that's okay.
people that will say, well, that's terrible because we lost a butterfly, but we fed a bird. That's part of their job. So it's still beneficial either way. And we have to recognize, I want to see all of these butterflies all over my flowers, but I want to see the birds too. So we don't necessarily need to shelter them all the time. There is some, I guess, just that attachment, and maybe in elementary school, you got to raise a butterfly.
Yeah.
That's great to get kids exposed to it and thinking about it. But as adults, we need to recognize that sometimes there is a sort of a selection process where the weaker and slower ones might be carrying those diseases like the OE that we hear about a lot. And don't ask me to say the Latin name for it. OE is good enough. But sometimes we need to let nature take its course and provide the space for it to happen, but the less that we do, the less that we have to do. So where we're trying to manage these viruses and diseases that are impacting colonies of pollinators, if we didn't shelter the weak ones as much, then it could actually benefit the colony.
And I was just thinking about snakes,
Yeah.
which we have a tremendous amount of in this county and in Florida, and they're beneficial.
Right.
But a lot of people don't like snakes in their yard. But again, if you have turf grass and just a lot of lawn, you're not going to have a place for the snakes to be able to hide. And I like my snakes in my backyard. We have a black racer that's
I love
always
the black
there.
racer as long as it's not in my pool.
Right, as long as it's not in your pool. And again, it's not in my house, but as long as it's in the yard and I don't bother it, I know that it's going to be beneficial because of what it eats. And,
Exactly.
And do I want rats? No. And so it will keep that population down. So having a little bit more diversity in your yard and reducing that lawn can really help.
Well, that leads us to our second point, which is vertical layering in your yard. And that's something that is aesthetically pleasing, that you see shorter plants at the front of a section of maybe a flower patch that you have, and then some medium filler plants, and then some tall, dramatic things. If you even think of that in a container, there's an axiom: thriller, filler, spiller, where you have something that is a bold statement that stands upright and gives it some structure. You have something that spills out along the edges or over the sides of a container, and then that filler that just fills it in and gives it that finished look. And you can do that in your yard where you would have trees, shrubs, perennials, annuals, down to smaller ground cover type plants.
One of the things that I found interesting in this particular tip was the idea of islands of vegetation. So if we take a step back, we don't want a lot of lawn cover, but my HOA says I have to have a certain amount. So now you have some trees, and right plant, right place. Maybe you plant something under the trees, and maybe you have a series of trees, and now you can have some islands with some vertical layering, which would enhance and help. So yes, there will still be some turf grass.
Ground cover, even if it's not turf grass.
It's better ground cover. But again, with having these islands in there, that helps the wildlife and enhances that particular.
And enough of the islands in a close proximity start to establish a corridor. And that is something where the wildlife corridor, that if you get together with some of your neighbors, and I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but that
I was
within
thinking
your
about
community,
our neighbors, yeah.
That if you can show your neighbors how beautiful this is, and they look over and maybe they've got only 2 or 3 plant species in their yard, and they see that your yard is just covered in butterflies and pollinators and all these things. They're like, how did you do that? Well, let me tell you about it. Check out this Planting Pinellas podcast, and they'll tell you how to do it too.
Exactly. So the third tip is an interesting one, a very interesting one, which is to provide snags or bush piles. And this one, I'm not sure what the tolerance will be on, with certain people. But essentially what this means is that, let's say you have an old tree and it gets cut down, or a log falls somewhere in your yard.
Or even it doesn't fall. So I have a cool example in my neighborhood. Someone had a palm tree that died, and it's been, I want to say 1 or 2 years ago. And I watched as the top started to droop over and the leaves browned out and fell, and it was just slowly decaying. And my old mindset was saying, why haven't they taken that down yet? It was right on the main entry road into my neighborhood and right at the property line at the street. And so everybody that lives beyond them in the neighborhood is driving by this dead tree. Well, this summer, my whole perspective on that tree changed when a woodpecker moved in. And that woodpecker excavated cavities and has a nest in there. And I see it and I'm looking for it every time that I drive by. And I'm so glad that neighbor kept that dead palm tree, because it provided habitat and shelter. And cavity nesting birds in particular are at a lot of risk in our area, because the mindset for so many years and for so many people has been, the tree is dead, take it down. And we have one of the big box stores just up the road from the Florida Botanical Garden has a beautiful oak snag. And they have preserved it and they have kept it there. And I love it every time I go by. But again,
I haven't seen that one.
when I first would see it, I thought,
to go and look
oh
at
man, that tree is dead. Why haven't they taken it down yet? But they're actually providing habitat not only for birds, but also for various insects. And the dead trees support more biodiversity than living trees, exponentially so. I want to say it's like in the thousands.
And that's why I found that tip so interesting, because a lot of us have that mindset that, it's dead, I have to cut it down. But the reality is it can be really, really beneficial.
And I want to throw in one more resource here, which will also be in the show notes. But there's a website called NeighborWoodWatch.org.
Oh, yeah.
And they, again, have resources explaining why it's beneficial to keep trees and snags and how to analyze your risk and say you've got a 20-foot tree and it's 15 feet away from your house. If you cut it down to 10 feet tall, so you reduce half of the standing dead tree, then it's not going to hit your house if it falls down. So you're able to preserve it in a way that doesn't put you at risk. And that is a valid thing to consider.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a very important point that we have to bring up, that we don't want you leaving just a dead tree out there and then potentially a hurricane comes and knocks it into your house. Obviously, you have to think about the risk and what the risk is for you and for your house and for your yard. But you can make it so that it can actually be beneficial.
And feel free to contact an arborist and find an ISA certified arborist that can come out and analyze that risk practically for you and determine what you need to do or not do to maintain as much as you can. And even if you just keep the stump, where stump grinding is an expensive part of tree removal, if you can even just keep the stump, that still provides habitat for a lot of insects and other things, and it provides nutrients into the ground as it decomposes. That is essentially a decaying mulch. So something else that you can do, even if you're not keeping a tree, or maybe your trees are all alive and so it's not really a factor for you, is keeping brush piles and things that they can provide shelter. One of the things that any kind of wildlife is going to need is shelter. They need food and they need water. So if you can have a compost pile that is limbs that are breaking down gradually, that actually gives a little nesting area for some of the small wildlife. But not everybody has room for that. So there are ways that you can incorporate some limbs that you've trimmed off of a tree or a shrub, that you can make a wattle fence where you create a boundary on each side with some stakes, and then you just pile it up and make a little border edging that can actually be really beautiful.
I was going to say it'd be attractive too.
And it's still giving benefit. So you can really get creative about this and work with the aesthetic component and still provide some space, because there are, for example, bees that will nest inside of broken stems.
Right.
And over the winter, they'll crawl down in there and then they come back out when it warms up again. And some of the bigger hollow stems, maybe a bamboo that's broken off or something. There are amphibians and reptiles that will crawl in there. So all of these are helpful to different kinds of wildlife.
So the fourth tip, which is important, is provide water. And in this place, it's essential for wildlife habitats. Water needs to be there. It benefits the wildlife. I mean, a simple one is a bird bath, and we'll talk a little bit more later on. But putting a bird bath in, or you want to get really creative and put a small pond in, you can go ahead and do that too. Be careful in our environment here with mosquitoes.
Right. You want to make sure that it's not stagnant water.
Right.
So if it is a bird bath, make sure that you're cleaning it routinely. There are treatments that are recommended by IFAS. You can look on the Ask IFAS website for how to maintain a bird bath. Make sure that it's not stagnant standing water, because mosquitoes can breed in as little as an inch, like a bottle cap size of
so
water.
You want to be careful about that. So this is something that we did in our yard, and my wife and I just love it. We sit there. We have 2 blue jays that come in and they take a drink, they take a little bath, and I think that's one of the other beautiful things about this particular principle is that it's enjoyable. It's
very rewarding.
It's very rewarding, exactly, and it's enjoyable to watch. To sit in your house in the air conditioning, which is which is nice.
Or setting up some chairs in a shaded spot.
Yeah, but that's what you do. Watching wildlife and watching their behavior is just really, really fascinating and really, really interesting, and what they do. And that, doing these things and using these tips is really, really, really beautiful. So the next tip is one, to just plant native vegetation.
Yeah, the animals and the insects that are naturally occurring in our area or have naturalized in our area are dependent on the plants that they're used to finding here. And so we have a great opportunity that we can plant things that are tropical and things that are very exciting, exotic plants, and yet those are not familiar to our native wildlife here. So if we're really trying to support the wildlife that depends on the space and the environment that our county provides, we need to be giving them the things that they like as much as possible. And yeah, you can have a mixture of it, but maybe those planting islands that we talked about, maybe you could have 1 or 2 islands that are just all native and Florida-friendly plants. And I'll talk back to the principle 1 where we referred to the Florida-friendly plant.
You got there before I did, because I was, that was what came to my mind immediately with this particular tip.
Yeah, on that app, you can select that you want plants that are friendly to pollinators, and you can pick whether you want it to be birds or specifically hummingbirds are isolated, and then butterflies and other insects are an option that you can say, I want something that is medium sized so I can get that layering, but I want it to attract butterflies.
And so having that native vegetation is just so important.
Now, here's an interesting thing, and this is tip number 6, providing bird feeders, but the plants can be the bird feeders. Yeah. And also houses, either bird houses or bat houses, that if you have a space where you're able to do that, the plants can do that too. So I mentioned a bird nested in my garden. It was on a vine, and that bird built its nest in the coral honeysuckle vine, and kind of using the support of the trellis that is holding up the vine, that I didn't have to put out a birdhouse.
Right.
I just had plants that the birds are naturally attracted to, and that the butterflies and the caterpillars are going to be naturally there.
We have an Ixora bush in our front. It's just a very small little plot, not much, but it's very filled out. And this year I was out there because I'm trying to plant some native plants in the front of it, and I kept hearing a little chirp, chirp, chirp. And we have this mockingbird in our backyard, and I saw the mockingbird fly in. So that we're nesting right there. So again, I didn't have a birdhouse. I didn't have something that they needed, but I had that space. But we found the right plant that was there, and the bird found it, and so it was beautiful. So and going back to the tip, I think it's important that you don't have to go full in. Mm-hmm. But if you are going to use and try to get a birdhouse or and bird feeders, you got to be thinking about what kind of birds you want, what kind of birds feeder it would have.
Well, I have a friend that recently moved into a second-story apartment, and she loves gardening, but obviously she doesn't have a lot of space to be able to do that. She got a stick-on bird feeder, and she put it on her second-floor window, on the outside of the window, where the birds can come in and get bird seed. So she's not really able to put a bush like a beautyberry that the birds will come and eat the fruit off of it, but she can have that birdseed feeder being in a limited space like that.
And again, it goes back to do what you can with what space you have, and you can actually attract that wildlife. And I'll go back to it's rewarding, it's enjoyable, it's wonderful to see.
And something that is kind of the negative side of this is thinking about things that are unfamiliar and things that, we can relate to this. If we're in a space that's just very much out of our comfort zone, it's very unfamiliar, we're not as likely to just settle in and stay there a while. We need to remove the exotic plants from our outside spaces as much as possible. And there's a lot of plants that inside, managed in a container, they can be very beautiful as houseplants that they don't have any business going outside in our climate because they quickly become invasive. And I say become invasive. They either are or they aren't. That a plant that's invasive is something that is not native to our area. It is harmful and it causes a problem. It's a clearly defined thing. And there's a whole website about that as well. I can link that as well.
Yeah, link to that because I think it's the Florida Invasive Species Council. Their website would be very useful for you to look at. And I think going back to what you were saying, it presents a problem because some of these invasive plants can become monoculture.
Yeah, they can disrupt natural areas.
They can disrupt an entire natural area. I mean, Brazilian pepper as the prime example.
And they outcompete the native plants that our pollinators and our wildlife really need.
And that goes to our native wildlife too. Yeah. I mean, that happens also. So you got to be careful with that.
Now, something that I'm going to step on some toes here. Cats are not native wildlife here. Domestic house cats are actually considered invasive by the dictionary definition, that it's not native here and it does cause damage, that it is listed as a top 100 of the world's worst invasive alien species by the Global Invasive Species Program. Don't come at me.
What?
Come at them.
Yeah, I mean, this tip, manage pets, I know I was thinking, how are we going to talk about this and not tread lightly? I mean, even dogs, right? Yeah. So people will have their dogs in the yard, but I think it's just, again, how much you want to manage what they're going to do and how much disruption they can have.
And honestly, in our heat, the dogs are not going to be comfortable being outdoors all the time anyway. So if you want to have a dog or a cat, have an inside space that you can manage it. And it helps actually to reduce diseases. Cats, they hunt for sport. A domestic house cat is generally well fed, and they still will go out and hunt lizards and birds and things that are benefiting our ecosystem. And they're not even doing it out of need. They're just doing it for fun.
And scientists estimate that cats are responsible for killing hundreds of millions of birds, possibly more.
Possibly in the billions.
So so we really need to
So have your fluffy cat, have it contained, just like your exotic plants. Keep it contained. If you want to have it, I'm not saying you can't have it, but understand the impact that it can have if it gets out of your control. And as soon as you let it unsupervised outside of that controlled space of your home, then there's the potential that it could be causing damage. And you say, oh, my little fluffy would never. It might. So it's just not worth the risk. It's just not worth the risk.
So the next one, that is just reducing pesticide use. And I think if we go back to some of the other tips where we're reducing the amount of lawn, we are increasing some native plants, you won't have to use as much pesticide on your lawn. And if you can reduce that, that's going to help a great deal because it's going to kill many kinds of insects, especially if you use a broad spectrum kind of one.
And like we said earlier, 99% of insects are either neutral or beneficial. That 1% that are actually harmful, it's not worth poisoning everything, because once you've poisoned the ants or the other bugs, and then a bird eats it, that bird could get sick from that pesticide. And let's say that a larger wildlife eats the bird, and the bird was diseased and poisoned by this pesticide, and now that larger wildlife is picking up on that. These things can get into the ground. They can cause a ripple effect that we don't know.
Fascinating with food chains is that pesticide gets magnified as it moves up the food chain.
Yeah. So anything that we can do to reduce the impact that we're having. And there are places where pesticides can be used responsibly, but reducing them in your lawn is going to benefit the wildlife around you. So once we've done all of these things and we've gone through 9 different tips, we want to see how much more we can do. So tip number 10 is to expand the scale. And this could be within your own yard. Maybe you had that little island. Maybe you just had one container that was some native pollinator-friendly plants. And now you get 2 containers or 2 islands, or you make the island bigger, or you make your turf grass smaller. Or you reach out to your neighbors and you say, hey, let's get this to be a bigger thing than just us. Maybe you reach out to your community and say, hey, there's this space. Let's make it a community garden where it can benefit more wildlife. Maybe you get involved in community projects in your area and you help at public places to establish some pollinator gardens or establish some wildlife habitats. And anything that we can do on a small scale is going to help. And then as we have success and we see that rewarding effort in the smaller scale, I think it's kind of addictive that we just want to make it expand and be more.
And I think one of the things that I personally love about our area is the ability to be driving down the middle of Ulmerton Rd and look up and see a bald eagle.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
You know, where I grew up, that wasn't the case. But here, you know, when I can see that, I realize that if we do our part.
And those majestic, large birds, the raptors, the ospreys, things like that, that we see around our county, they rely on those tall snags. They rely on those larger spaces of habitat. And they also rely on the smaller wildlife. So the more that we can keep the insects alive, we're keeping the birds alive. That's keeping the larger predators alive. And then up to the raptors and even the sea aquatic life that we have. It's a food web. It all interconnects. So the impacts that we have, even in our small space, you may think it's not much, but it's a ripple effect. And the more that you can get involved and the more that you can encourage others to get involved, it's creating more and more of a benefit in a county that is getting less and less natural, more and more developed. And so here in Pinellas, anything that we can do to preserve some of those habitats is just an incredible investment in our future.
And it will be so beneficial for so much of the wildlife, not just pollinators, but all of them.
Absolutely. So let's wrap it up as we do with our Ready, Set, Grow. Now, a lot of what we're saying in August is the same that we said in July because it's our hot season, it's our rainy season. The hurricane season lasts from June to September. And so even into next month, a lot of these things are going to be pretty similar, but we are starting to see the end in sight, that it's getting closer to when our real gardening season is going to start as it cools off a little bit.
Yeah, sometime in October, probably.
Well, yeah.
So to get ready, as we talked about last episode, you want to be solarizing your soil, getting that ready. Prep garden beds for the fall.
That with compost or with something like a cover crop. It's not too late for a short seed to harvest cover crop, that you can still get that out there and replenish some of the nitrogen in your soil with a plant that is not impacted by the fertilizer restriction. So anything that you're doing to improve your soil right now is going to help set up your garden for success once the hottest part of the summer calms down. Now, we mentioned the rainy season. This is an interesting time to think about stormwater.
Yeah.
And what we can do for stormwater. So rain barrels, rain gardens, anything that you can do that it is making the water feature that uses your rainwater as a collection, but then it's also providing that natural water source for some wildlife. So it kind of ties back in.
That helps.
So we need to be set. And I consider that the maintenance portion of what we're doing in this month. And anything that is a flowering plant that is tolerating the heat and still blooming, you want to be watching for those blooms to fade and maybe allow them to set seed so that it can feed our birds and other wildlife.
Yes.
But once it's served its purpose, then go ahead and remove those spent blooms, cut them back. As applicable with your fertilizer ordinances, you may want to supplement some of your flowering plants. You can use the 000 fertilizers right now, where it does not contain nitrogen, it does not contain phosphorus,
Okay.
and then that third 0 would be the potassium, that those will still have micronutrients, and
That can be very helpful.
that is something that some plants will
will
need,
need.
even some of your larger plants like palm trees, that if you're seeing a nutrient deficiency in those plants, that you can get a non-restricted fertilizer per your local ordinance. Make sure that you're doing your homework to get the thing that is right for your
So
place.
they can go back and listen to the episode on
Absolutely. That
on
was
fertilizers.
June, I think. Or no, that was in May.
That was in May.
Yeah. So look that one up if you didn't see it yet.
Of course, check your irrigation. You want to make sure that it's turned off, or you have a rain and sensor this time of year. It's not the best thing to see somebody sprinkling their lawn
In the middle of a rainstorm.
In the middle of a rainstorm.
It's so frustrating.
It's very frustrating.
But being responsible with your irrigation is something that we've also talked about. We
Yes.
had a great guest on our show, Doris Heitzman, talking about that. And while we're talking about water, watch for those standing water sources and make sure that you're dumping those, or if it's a water feature that you have, that you're maintaining it properly.
Yeah. So in terms of grow, some things that we can still grow this time of year.
There are some
Charlotte?
heat-tolerant plants,
Okay.
and we talked about these same ones the last couple of months: Vinca, Coleus, Pentas, Salvia, Celosia. Some of these are annuals, and so they will run their course over the summer months, and then once it starts to cool off, then they're done, and you would have to replant them. But if you get an established plant that maybe you buy it at a nursery center, a garden center, that you can still get those in. Just make sure that you're keeping it well irrigated while it's getting established.
And we just planted a whole slew of coleus at the gardens last week.
Nice. I'll have to go check that out.
You have to go check that out in the palm garden.
Okay. Well, and there's some herbs that we can plant right now too. And the same thing, that you want to be thinking about those as plants. And maybe you can start the seeds indoors, and we'll talk about that for vegetables as well. But
Yeah.
if you have the plant already, there are varieties of ginger that you can plant right now, the Mexican tarragon, turmeric, rosemary, all of those things you can start with, even just a 4-inch plant that you get at your local garden center, and making sure that you're keeping it watered while it settles in. But once it gets its root down, then many of those can actually be perennials and come back year after year.
So for vegetables, probably not so much putting plants in the ground, but right now, probably starting them from seeds. I think this would
Absolutely.
be a perfect time to be able to do that, because they're going to take a couple months to get established, and then we're going to be ready for our growing season for these particular plants.
And things that still need to have some of the warm, sunny time to grow, that we can get it a head start while it's not too hot: eggplant, okra, peppers, different kinds of pumpkins and squash, even tomatoes. We grow those better in the fall or the spring months than we do in the summer here, just because it's too hot here. So being ready, getting prepared, starting those things, and buying seeds tends to be cheaper than buying the plants, because you get 10 or 20, maybe even 50 seeds for what you would pay for 1 or 2 plants that somebody else has grown. So just with a little bit of supplies, you can get that head start for yourself. So I think this was a lot of fun talking about our native plants, native wildlife, things that we can do to help, just getting involved. And as we keep saying in each episode, that even if we only have a little bit of space, maybe just a little patio in a condo, or maybe a big yard in a large neighborhood, whatever it is, we can make a difference. And each of us making a difference the best that we can where we are has those greater effects that make Pinellas that beautiful place that we love to live.
Thanks for tuning into Planting Pinellas. We hope you're feeling inspired to get involved, learn more, and grow alongside this incredible community.
Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you like the show, leave us 5 stars or a review. And don't forget to share with fellow plant lovers. Until next time, keep planting, keep growing, and keep making Pinellas County a place to thrive.
This podcast is brought to you by the University of Florida's Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences Extension in Pinellas County, Florida, an equal opportunity institution.